Hi, my name is NaTasha Yvette Williams, and I am a guest on Nothing to Lose But Yourself podcast hosted by Ricky Day.
My guest on the podcast today is NaTasha Yvette Williams. NaTasha is known as one of Broadway's royalty. She is one of the few African American women to consistently star in major roles on Broadway, such as Mama Morton in the critically acclaimed Broadway hit Chicago with Brandy, Miss Sophia in The Color Purple with Fantasia, and that's obviously very topical right now. We'll talk about that. A Night with Janis Joplin as Aretha Franklin, Mariah and Porgy and Bess winning an Ensemble Tony Award for that. And she also appeared in Chicken and Biscuits and Waitress. Great. Now I'm hungry. Uh, she's appeared on television as well. And she's obviously, you guys, an accomplished vocalist who's sung at some of the best live venues in this country. But something else that jumped out at me is NaTasha graduated from North Carolina A&T State University, where she majored in math and theater. I
Mhm.
want
Aggie Pride. Yes, I had to say that.
Oh, there we go. Aggie Pride. Aggie Pride. Let's do it again. Go. I was talking. Do it again.
Aggie Pride. Yep.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
It's
Uh,
been a long time.
magna cum laude. She continued her studies in acting and completed her Master's of Fine Arts at Michigan State University. I am so
Mhm.
grateful to welcome to the podcast NaTasha Yvette Williams. How are you, Natasha?
Hi, I'm great. Ricky, how are you?
I am wonderful. So good
Good.
to be with you today. I
Hmm.
am grateful that you're here. And as I was telling her in the pre-conversation, we're going to pray that the Lord has continued to bless these conversations in the podcast because last year
That's
at
right.
this time, Michael R. Jackson was on as
Right
a
here.
nominee and went on to win a couple of days later. And so, here we are again.
Got a great record. So I'm
Does
glad to
lightning
be here.
strike twice?
I was
So how
already
does
glad to be here. Now I'm really glad.
that's what's up. So, yeah, okay. First of all, let's be clear. You won a Tony Ensemble Award
Yes.
before, and that's amazing, and I'm sure that was great. But what's it like? Have you gotten used to hearing Tony Award nominated
Mm.
actress NaTasha Yvette Williams? How's that feel?
I don't think used to is the right word. I'm certainly happy, even comfortable in it right now, but I
Hmm.
still cry every other block. I can walk down the street, somebody say something, and it just hits me um, at how grateful I am and how different it does feel. I mean, we were nominated when I was in the Gershwin's Porgy and Bess for Best Revival.
Hmm.
And when we won, that was an extraordinary feeling. But when we were nominated, I didn't have all of the individual kind of events that I've had now as an individual nominee.
Hmm.
Um, so as soon as you're nominated, you're running like every other day. It's not, they don't call it campaigning, but it's kind of campaigning, I guess.
Hmm.
Just sort of getting your name in front of everyone that you can possibly be in front of so that if they haven't seen the show yet or haven't voted yet, that they still have an opportunity to see you in a different light than you are on stage. So we've been hitting the pavement and doing those events and doing everything we can just to be present in the moment. And I'm entering each space wide open, eyes wide open, heart open, just to receive all the. It's amazing the amount of love and congratulations that have come forth with this nomination. I didn't really know how many people were aware of who I was
Hmm.
until this. So it's really fulfilling, inspiring, and wonderful moment getting nominated and a dream realized. Really a dream realized. And I think one of the dreams that I had sort of pushed in the back burner because the first time I was eligible for Tony was 17 years ago. You
Oh
know,
wow.
eight Broadway shows ago, 17 years ago, and each time I was always saying, "Okay, it's okay, maybe next year, maybe next time,"
Hmm.
um, and next time finally arrived. In 2023. So it's a it's an incredible time for me right now. I just feel so blessed and so fortunate and so aware of the faithfulness of God. Um,
We
so
love,
that's
we
how I am.
love to hear it, and I can hear it in your voice. I mean, you
Hmm.
echoed my sentiments in these kinds of situations. Not that I've been nominated for a Tony,
Hmm.
but when good things are happening, I really kind of focus on being grateful, and
Yeah.
I hear that gratitude, that
Mm.
that depth of gratitude in your voice. and that's beautiful to see. And it also is it's really good to see you receiving love
Mm,
in this moment because it's so
yeah.
feels like so little of it in the world right now. So
Yes.
it's good
True, true.
to know that
And there
you
are
are.
moments that they're not, there's none. So it was just an avalanche of love, people calling, and I really felt like at that moment when it was announced, I said at the initial meet the nominees uh, press junket that I felt like this was a community Tony nomination. This is our Tony nomination because I've had so many people um, walking with me and helping me and holding me, pulling me
Yeah.
throughout the process. So I feel like it's a big community nomination. I mean, I'm gonna get to keep the trophy if I win, but
I hear that.
it belongs to my village.
I love it, Natasha. I know you've answered this 1,000 times by
Mm,
now, but I want to assume my listeners have heard this. Tell me about that moment you found out you were
mm.
nominated. Where were you? What were you doing? And what did it feel
That morning, May 2nd, 2023, my cast was performing on the Today Show.
like? Hmm.
And we were in the studio, we had done our little rehearsals and stuff like that, and we're standing waiting, and there was another segment on, and they were off camera, but in the studio room. And they announced like the first five awards, and we found out that J. Harrison G. I always have to
Gee.
repeat that.
Hmm.
It's G, like the alphabet. Um, was nominated. Christian Boyle was nominated, and we were nominated for the best musical. So
Hmm.
we were all huddled together and trying to be quiet, not to scream. We had the excitement of getting that news, but we hadn't performed yet. So
Hmm.
everybody had to, and then next was our segment. So we had to wipe tears of joy because we had gotten those nominations, that announcement, and then we had to perform. Then right away after our performance, we went upstairs to the Peacock Room at NBC, and somebody was scrolling on a phone or a computer. I have no idea what, because I stopped to the bathroom right after the performance,
Hmm.
and then got up the steps. I heard people screaming, so I knew we had gotten some more nominations because we in total we our cast. I'm like I got 13 nominations,
Wow.
um, and I came up the stairs and I heard one category, and then it was my category, and I just sort of froze. And my dresser was beside me, and it was most of my cast, but at least everybody in that opening number was there. And they called one name, two names, three names, and my name was the fourth name in my category. And I just started crying, and, and everybody was screaming and yelling. And I was like, "Is this real?" I just kept asking the question, "Is this real? Is this for real? Is it real?" And just wanting to be pinched or I
Hmm.
don't know something,
Yeah.
um, because it felt like something that you hope for, but protect yourself in case it doesn't. And and it had not happened so many times prior to that. I just allowed myself to trust in His timing,
Hmm.
and I didn't know what that was. I didn't know if it was now or
Yeah.
the next time. So it was incredibly. So I was in the Peacock Room at NBC with a large portion of my cast. Um, and it was the most incredible moment to hear my name and to hear everybody sort of celebrating and rallying around me, and me doing the same thing for other cast members that were cast. It was an incredible opportunity and blessing to be able to be together at that moment.
That's beautiful. I mean, you can't script it any better than that.
Ooh, my.
Look at God rewarding your yes to using your gifts to do what you're called to do in this world and
Yeah.
bring a little joy to all of us. I mean, we need entertainment probably more than ever right now.
Oh
And
my
so
goodness, don't we?
what you
We need
guys
that
do,
escape. We need that escape. Yeah.
yeah. And what you guys do for that reason for me is very, very valuable. And I think people
Mm-hmm.
really need to look at it as what it is. It's a
Yeah.
escape that helps us to cope with the world and also
Sure.
sometimes experience the world through these fictional stories and
Yes.
shows and find a way to remember and connect with our shared humanity. So what you guys do is of great service. Everybody has gifts. You're
Thank you.
using your gifts to serve us and bring us joy. So it warms my heart
Thank
to
you.
see
Yay.
come together the way it has for you. And the other thing too is just perspective. You talk about, is this the time? And
Mm-hmm.
8 shows in 17 years. You're a
Mm,
black actress on
mm-hmm.
Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
8 shows and 17 years.
Yeah.
There's another
That
way to look
alone.
at that. That's a
Yeah.
blessing right there.
It is. It is. It is most definitely a blessing. There's, a lot of times there's just one or two, and industry has really gone through an upheaval in the last, since the pandemic, since the murder of George Floyd. There's been a lot of changes to sort of make sure that our industry is inclusive and diverse, and there's a sense of belonging for everybody. So as we've gone through those changes, on the beginning side of that, before these all these changes started happening, I would be looked at as someone who had a lot of success, and I did, and I do, and that's great. But even in that, there was harm, that occasionally happened to me as a Black
Mhm.
artist in my industry, and so those are the things that I really am championing now, so that there's less harm for Black artists in my industry, as we go forward and move into this new era of Broadway and new era of our country where we are um, sensitive and aware of the privileges that some have that others don't, and that we need to make the space for everyone. And that doesn't negate anybody. It just says that there's room for all of us.
Yeah.
And I'm glad Broadway is starting to embrace that idea. So um, it's a beautiful thing, beautiful time
Yeah,
to be an
it's
artist.
necessary, timely, and it's really honestly kind of
Mm,
overdue. And it's giving other people access that
mm,
is deserved and earned. It's
sure.
not giving away or taking
Mm-mm.
anything away from anyone who already has. It's
Right.
just making the pies, making the
Yeah.
tent a little bigger than it was, and it's
Exactly.
also helping the entire industry when you think about it. Because I have a great deal of respect for you guys and what you do, and Broadway's wonderful. But I didn't know much about Broadway before I moved to New York. I grew up in
Hmm.
California, and
Hmm.
Broadway is, it's got a presence around the country from these touring
Sure.
shows, but it's not nearly as big in the rest of the country as it is here in New
Yeah.
York. And I found when the pandemic hit, lots of other industries, lots of other mediums found ways to adapt. And
Wow.
Broadway just kind of seemed like they were having a difficult time
Yeah,
adapting.
I mean, we just weren't open, so it was
Yeah.
closed. But the thing
And what
about
I
theater
found,
and arts in New York is that there's the synergy of everything else that's connected to it.
hmm
Takes a hit. If it's even in housing or uh, the restaurants and all the things, the people that are coming into the city
yeah,
to see the Broadway shows and all of the things
tourism.
that they take part in during that time. If those shows aren't open, then all of those businesses begin to suffer, and the disparity between not having arts and entertainment in any community is can be felt, throughout the
Yeah,
community. So
it's
I'm glad we're
devastating. And
back, and I'm glad we're back better.
I'm glad you're back as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was going to add is this call, this reckoning that's brought greater diversity,
Mm-hmm.
has not only helped give people a voice who didn't have one or didn't have access to share their voice before, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also really helped the business itself, because I didn't find Broadway, as much as I love it, I didn't find it to be particularly innovative over the years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
with new people come new ideas and new expressions and new ways to share creativity, and audiences, I think, are blessed by that. You have
Yes.
a deeper variety of voices. And yes, there's going to be some shows that don't make it. It takes a while to get new voices
Audience.
heard and get people
Yeah.
open to new ways of, experiencing shows. But I think it's important. And so that diversity serves everybody well.
Definitely, definitely.
And
I
it's
think
just,
that theater, the way we used to do it, with whether it was with all white creative teams or just stories that are written from a one perspective, can't survive in 2023 and beyond. I think those goers are no longer um, able to sustain the life of the entire musical industry. So we have to open these things up, because you should, because it's the right thing to do, but because there are other voices that need to be heard and other stories that need to be told. And I think if theater is to survive, because like you said, outside of New York, everybody, you don't necessarily know how big Broadway is here and how effective and impactful it can be, but it's
mhm.
only impactful as the audiences that it reaches. So we have to open it up so that we can reach other audiences and give access to people who don't normally come to the theater. And they have to see themselves. They have to see not necessarily just somebody that looks like them, skin color and all that, but the stories have to be reflective of humanity. And that comes in all shapes, colors, and sizes. And it would behoove anyone who's doing anything to be inclusive in this day and age if you want to survive.
So well said, and I
Mm.
completely agree. And at the end of the day, as humanity, we're far more alike than we are
Oh,
different.
yes,
And
definitely.
entertainment and Broadway is a unique way of being able to help us understand that, see that, and experience that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's different times for sure. It's also going to be very different Tony Awards this year.
Yeah.
I, for the life of me, am confused at how they're going to pull off a live broadcast without writers. We all are aware of the Writers Guild strike, which at the day of the taping of this show
Mm.
is still going on.
Yeah.
So I'm confused at how they're going to do it, but I'm curious, what's the buzz like within the community about the
Listen,
show? Is there a
we
heightened sense of nervousness for those of you who may be participating as presenters or awardees, or what's everybody thinking? How's this going
the
to work?
buzz
I
right
don't even
now is
understand.
still everybody's still asking what's going to happen when I don't know when you normally get your order to perform, but we don't have it yet.
Hmm.
I don't know if they're able to, and although the rules aren't set for us, so nobody knows. Like they can't speak anything, you can't ad lib anything. So are they going to just say something like it hot on the screen and then we perform, or is somebody going to sing it? I think sometimes you can sing things, it becomes a lyric and not a written word. And so the buzz is all confusion right now. And
Wow.
excited confusion because nobody really knows what's going on.
The irony is, it's
We're also in a
probably going.
different space too,
Oh
so
yeah, because I was going to ask you. Yeah, is you're in a different
yeah,
space as well, right?
different space uptown. And nobody's been there before, so we're not quite sure how the travel is going to work from the theater to the space. And I mean, it's all just an excited, kind of confused, kind of, let's just open ourselves up, roll with it, and see what happens. I have no idea what the show's going to be like without any writers.
Yeah. The irony is, it's probably going to be the most watched Tonys ever because everyone's curious. Is this going to be a car wreck,
Exactly,
or is this going to
exactly.
be brilliance, or some combination of the two? I guess I guess we'll find out soon. But I will say this: if anybody can pull it off, you guys are the kind of
That's
folks.
it.
You're the
That live
community.
theater audience, we're going to
Yeah,
do it.
you're the folks that can pull it off. It's going to be interesting. I want to. I know we did it in the credit so people just understand how blessed and accomplished you are. Many people who are going to know you from Broadway, and then as we talked about, not everybody around the country knows Broadway, but you've been on
Hmm.
television as well. You were Mama Matron Morton in Chicago with Brandy, Sophia in The Color Purple with Fantasia. You Brianna Jenkins in Chicken and Biscuits. Sweet Sue is your current role, and Some Like It Hot. And you've been
And I
on
was
the
in
Matter.
Tina Turner the musical. Tina Turner the musical.
Oh my goodness!
I
And
played
I'm
her
so glad
mom.
you mentioned that.
Oh
How
yes,
did the passing of Tina affect
yeah.
you?
Wow. I mean, Tina was like my mother's favorite artist, and we
Hmm.
used to sit and watch her, and my mother would talk solely about her legs like the whole time. And I didn't get to meet Tina this time when we were working on Tina, because I was a replacement for Don Lewis. Actually, I was the second person who played the mother
Yeah.
on
Dawn,
Broadway.
shout out to Dawn Lewis.
And
She's a
shout out to
friend
Don
and she's been
Lewis.
on the podcast as well. Miss her.
She originated the role of Tina's mother in on Broadway, so I took over for her when she decided to go back to LA. And so I didn't get to meet Tina personally, but it affected me. It was just like, oh my gosh, because she's this icon. It just felt like we're just losing so many icons. And I know that's just the circle of life and it has to happen. But I was just so grateful for all of her contributions anyway. Her spirit that taught us to fight for yourself, stand up for yourself. Even if you get a little um, lost along the way and you put up with things that you shouldn't put up with, but eventually that spirit of rising up to say no more, enough is enough, and then not just surviving it but thriving beyond any type of adversity that she had, even from just growing up in Tennessee part and just sort of thriving. So her spirit lives through us. I was just so grateful that we had the example of her for so long, and that I got to be a part of that legacy on Broadway, celebrating her life and her triumphant life, and
Yeah,
now her triumphant rise to glory. Yeah.
what a blessing for you and what a blessing for us that she was in
Mm-hmm.
the world. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting? I agree with everything you said about her and her life and her legacy. But one of the things I think is most profound about her that people, for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
overlook is her intentionality around not living the rest of her life bitter towards
Mm-hmm.
Ike and hateful. She
Mm-hmm.
was very clear about letting that go. No
Yeah.
more. It's behind me,
Right.
but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life bad mouthing him, talking ill
Right.
about that, reliving that moment. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to let go
Mm-hmm.
and move on. And
Yeah.
that is a really powerful lesson. I think people miss that with Tina
Yes.
Turner. And
I'm
that
glad
for
you
me
do.
is one of the most powerful things that I learned from watching her, the
Mm-hmm.
grace at which she went forward and she just let go of the past. I'm
Yeah.
not taking it
Yeah.
anymore, and
Just
I'm not
even
going to
in the
live in that
music.
moment.
Like I'm not even gonna sing any blues anymore. I'm not singing any sad songs anymore. I'm
Exactly.
not
No
living
R&B
that,
for me. No
reliving
R&B
that.
for me.
Yeah. No, that's
Yep.
very powerful. Very powerful. I think you're right. I think we do overlook that at least in the articulation of it, because
Hmm.
that's what it's about. It's about not looking back and letting go and moving forward and deciding, I'm not dwelling. I'm not going to fight. Even I'm not even going to talk bad about anything that was done to me. I'm going to move forward and let it all go. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because the more you talk about it, the more you live in that moment. You A,
Hmm.
still in there, and
Right.
B, that becomes bigger and bigger baggage that you're carrying
Yeah.
on your journey. You may not even your journey may not even get off the ground if you got
Mm.
these big bags that you're carrying.
Yep.
You got to
So
let it
true.
go. Leave the bags
So
at home
true.
and get on the plane to your destiny.
Yes.
Before you had this amazing career, though, you were somebody's little girl. And I usually do this at the top of the conversation, but we're flowing. And I love it. But tell us a
Mm-hmm.
little bit about where you're from, your upbringing, and what that contribution to who you are and how you
Mm.
got to where you are in
You
this
try to
stage
make
of
me
your life.
cry again, Ricky.
Yes,
Okay.
we gonna have you crying all
I'm
day.
from I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina. I was actually born in Rochester, New York, but my folks are from North Carolina, and I was born in September, and it snowed in December, and my dad had to walk to work, and they moved. We moved, I think, in January. I was like 3 months old.
That
I was
was
three
like,
months
I'm not
old.
doing this.
He's like, yeah, this is it for me. I thought it was IBM or Xerox or something he worked for,
Hmm.
um, in Rochester, New York. And we moved to Philly, where my uncle lived. And we lived there for 5 years. I moved to Fayetteville, North Carolina, back home because my mother's mother got sick. So we moved back home to help out with her. And I was 5 or 6 years old. I started the first grade in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and that's my home. Um, I started singing at the church in Philly when I was 3 and continued that when I got down to my mother's home place. I'm from the country. I grew up in a farm land. My uncle had cows and pigs and corn and butter beans and collard greens and tomatoes. A big farm that
Hmm.
my uncles drove tractors and ran. On the other side, my aunt Gerda had like a mule and a plow. My uncle Lon, they plowed a small piece of land with that. I grew up on a dirt road that did not get paved until like my third year of college. Um, and I grew up feeding pigs and having pig pickings and climbing trees and
So you country
dreaming
country.
about not working on this farm, when I
That's
become
real.
an
That's
adult,
transparent. That
um,
is transparent.
singing in church and loving every minute of response of spirit and the parishioners.
Mhm.
Um, and then I went to college. I went to A&T, and like I said, I was a math major, and but I auditioned for the plays because I didn't even think theater was a thing. I mean, I knew I had been in some plays. I started at the community theater when I was
Mhm.
13, 14. Prior to that, it was just church. And prior to that, my idea of performing was television. I thought, I want to sit down and entertain people like I'm being entertained. Like
Right.
my parents we sit together after dinner and watch television. We laugh and we have this time together. And it would be great to be in the box doing that for other families as well. But theater and live performing, I didn't put it together. I didn't think you made money at it because I was in my community theater doing stuff, but not getting paid and not knowing that this was a thing. Um, so until I got to A&T and there was like I started doing these plays like, oh my gosh, we're spending all this time. My math is slipping. And they were like, no, this is a thing. You can do this. And then so that's what I started to sort of get serious about it and ended up double majoring and went to Michigan State right after that. But after that, I lost my uncle. I went back to Fayetteville, taught high school at West Delaware High School for a year,
Mhm.
and then had a fish fry, raised some money, and drove to New York and never looked back.
Raised on a farm, Aunt Gerda, and a fish fry to raise
Aunt
money for your
Gerda.
trip to New York. That
Hmm.
is the most,
And
and
my
I mean
parents,
this in
I
the
didn't
most
even mention my
positive
parents, but
way.
my parents were there. I didn't mention my parents, but my mother and father,
Uh-huh.
ooh, those two I can't even say enough about that. My mother passed in 2017. My father is still alive in North Carolina. He's going to have a watch party for the Tonys in my
What's your
hometown.
dad's name?
My dad is David Williams, Reverend David Williams. He was a
Reverend
pastor.
David Williams. Shout out to
Reverend
you.
David
You raised
Williams.
an amazing baby girl.
Yes, yes, yes. Um, uh, uh, Jay Harrison G, who's also from my hometown, Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Hmm.
Um, and so we're gonna hopefully
What are the
turn
chances of
make
that?
Fayetteville proud on Sunday night. Yeah, I know, like 20, 30 years apart now because I'm much older than him. But but
I
we're from
got
the same town, and yeah, so it's a good time. Fayetteville was very good to me, very nurturing, very artsy, and I got to fly there, and now I'm still flying, and it really is because of those roots. Really
you.
is
Yeah.
because of those roots.
That's beautiful. And you can feel those roots and how you move and how you speak and how you
Mm,
sing and how you
hmm.
deal and interact with people. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. One of the best things you can be, I think, in many ways, is from a small town and have those
Yes.
great values. And I think so many times in our culture wars, we get caught up in North versus South, black
Hmm.
versus white. It's like both experiences have something to offer. Rural
Yes.
experiences have a lot to offer, and so do
Hmm.
big city experiences. And I think somewhere in the middle, some merging of the two sets of values is kind of the way to
Yes.
go. And I don't know why we
I
can't see that
agree.
as opposed to fighting over it. But it is what it is. But I want to go back. How
Okay.
you from this small town? You've got all this talent in you that you may or may not have known that much about at the time.
Hmm.
But math was like the thing for you.
Yeah.
Majored in math.
I loved math. I loved numbers. I didn't like to read really. I didn't. English was fine. You know,
Hmm.
I was an AB student, but I didn't really like to read. I still don't like to read, but I love formulas. If I do this, that, and other, I get this result. And so
Hmm.
that for me was great. If I study hard, I'm gonna make an A. If I go from this point to that point, I'm gonna get there the fastest. I liked and still do order in that way.
Hmm.
Um
Hmm.
and knowing that if I do this, that, and the other, I'm gonna eventually get to X. Um
NaTasha, this is an
yeah,
important question. Have you
yes.
found that math and all that you learned in math and from math and because of math, have you
Hmm.
found that that's shown up and been helpful to you in your life in ways that weren't overtly connected to math? Like the way it taught you to
Absolutely.
think?
Absolutely. Just in terms of just that, just knowing that everything has a formula and a science to it.
Hmm.
Um I think it has helped me tremendously because if I can figure out what that process is,
Hmm.
then I can achieve it. I can
And
get there.
math taught you that.
Yeah, man
Now, I
taught me
wanted
that.
to call,
Even though even though a lot of people say you're not going to use that stuff. You're not going to use that stuff. I mean, even something as simple as learning how to shoot a basketball properly is geometry. Is what angle, what force are you pushing the ball
hmm
through the air? So we do need math. We do certainly need to know how to count our check and divide our money and figure out how we're going to spend each week so that we end up with something at the end. What we're going to save so that we. So even though we say,
absolutely.
"Oh, you're not going to use that stuff," you use it every day.
And
You
you're
use
going to
it
use
every day.
deductive reasoning, or at least you should, because it's going to help you make better decisions.
Word problems? Are you kidding me? It's
Mhm.
everything. Every day.
Yeah, and same thing with algebra, balancing things. Like, okay, you may not be doing equations for a living, but you got to know in your real life, if I do this over here,
Right.
it's going to have consequences over there. So, what is the balance? What am I willing to risk? All those things. And your math
All those
teaches you
things.
that. I just wanted to call that out because I didn't think it was a coincidence that even
Hmm.
though you love math, you work in the arts, and that the
Hmm.
two seemingly unrelated can
Right.
absolutely be related. And I think it's important. We have a lot of young
Hmm.
creatives of color who are listening to this, and
Yeah.
quite often I think people get caught up in those isms, right? That, oh, I'm
Yeah.
not going to need that stuff. What's the point? But
Right.
actually, you can learn
Right.
a lot about life from math and vice
Sure.
versa. I mean, at the end of the day, it's God's language, so
Yes.
it's
Very much
really
so.
interesting.
Mm.
Um,
I love that
it,
God's language.
it
Because
is. I mean,
for me, it became about, especially when I wasn't booking as much, it became about numbers.
mhm,
if I go to 10 auditions, I'm going to book something, and
mhm,
maybe I was only going to five. So
mhm,
let's up those numbers. Let's keep track, and let's make sure that we are charting um, how we progress so that we know what the process for us as individual is. You know what I mean? So math is all a part of that too. Charting my progress, how I learn, how I grow, how I move. all have elements of math for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. I'm
Mm.
glad we I'm glad we went there. This is what happens when you have conversations and
Yeah.
instead of interviews. Well, I've got seven great questions I want to ask you. No, we're having a conversation,
Mm.
and this is what happens in those. The theme of this podcast this season is for love and
Mm.
blackness, right? And it's
Mm.
for love as this defined by M. Scott Peck, and blackness as we all experience it. What is
Mm-hmm.
blackness? And I'm curious for you, what would you say, NaTasha, is your first great love? It could
Mm.
be God, it could be your first child, it could be your career, it could be whatever. What's your first great love?
My first great love is my dad, I think, or my mom. My mother was more accessible,
Hmm.
but my dad was that. I was always trying to give him the apple, you know. And my dad was a pastor and busy. You know what I mean? He was always
Hmm.
studying in the back room, or always going to help somebody else, or running to the hospital, or whatever he was doing. But it was always um, trying to get him to see me, basically.
Hmm.
It was definitely my first love. He used to take me to the nursery in Philly and tell me stories on the way and talk to me like I was 20 as opposed to 3.
Yeah.
Um, and he was definitely my first love. Definitely my first love, even though he wasn't as as accessible as a young person to me. Um,
Hmm.
we got closer as an adult, and he was just his love language was work, take care of the family. My dad's 83. Um,
Hmm.
and it wasn't let me hug you, let me tell you how I love you and I'm proud of you and all those kinds of things. So I was always kind of reaching for that with him, and we finally got there. But as an adult, you know,
Yeah, it's that's important. It's good to
yeah,
hear that, but it's important and it's tough because people forget when we talk about that with men that that's also the expectation that's heaped upon us.
mm,
You are as valuable as what you can provide. Your
mm,
role is to care for and provide, and if you have anything left after that, then hooray for you.
wow,
But
wow,
that's what it's about, and so we internalize that stuff,
sure,
and it gets difficult for people to grow beyond that sometimes, particularly of certain generation. They
hmm,
saw what they saw, they are who they are, but they
sure,
loved and showed love in all
yeah,
the ways that they were taught to show it. And so
hmm,
and it sounds like you guys have wonderful relationships, so it's not that you were harping on
hmm,
them, but I always lift that up to people. Be
yeah,
mindful of your words might say one thing, but all the rules in the society are saying something else, and you
yeah.
can't really.
I get caught up in that too, though. It's so
Yeah.
hard because you working for the family. Like my kids, I got 2 kids now, 12 years old, and I constantly am concerned about my presence in their
Hmm.
life. But I know I'm building. I know I'm not there for a lot of the time because I'm doing this. Just like my dad. I'm turning into that same kind of thing. So yeah, it's real important to sort of remember that it's only your effectiveness and your impactfulness. Um, I don't want them to get it as an adult. I want my kids to feel it now and be present with them now. So, oh, that's the challenge. That's a challenge for all of us to
Yeah, but
that.
sometimes it literally goes back to math, right?
Yeah.
If we have to have Alexis
Mm.
in
Hmm.
order for me to give you more time, then that's better than having the bins because
Yeah.
the time I
Yeah.
can't
The
get back.
time.
You can always upgrade on the material and so forth
Hmm.
and so on. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you figure out what works for you, what's important to you, and how you felt as a young person and
Mm.
what you wanted, and try to be what you think your kids want and what your kids tell you they need you to be for them. And you
Yeah.
make the compromises along the way. And it's never easy and it
Mm.
changes from day to day, week to week. But it's important to just be present and listen, and spirit's
Yeah.
it's not gonna mislead you.
Hmm.
um and I ask about the first great love because the first great love quite often really kind of sets the foundation for who a person is. And so with your dad being your first great love,
Hmm.
what kind of indelible mark on you do you feel like your dad's placed that's central to kind of who you are, since he was such a powerful influence in first great love?
Taking care of business
Hmm.
before anything else, before pleasure, before taking care of yourself. You know what I mean? I'm
Hmm.
changing that now because I think that self care thing for me and my generation is a little bit more important than it was for his.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's what he Take care of your business. Be um, respectable. Be disciplined. Be a person um, that no one can talk about your reputation. Even if you're disagreeing with someone, always do what you feel is right and what God is aligned for you to do. And if you do that, He'll take care of everything else. Um, if you just do what's right. So that's what He gave me and what I try to live by now, even and teach to my kids. With the twist of, yeah, but take care of yourself. Because I think also my parents taught me to take care of everybody else
Hmm.
first. Let's do this for the church. Let's do this
Hmm.
for sister so and so, or let's not give the appearance at all of anything that is wrong. So
Yeah.
if you don't feel like going to do such and such, do it anyway because sister so and so needs you to do it.
Yeah.
That I've sort of changed that in my life a little bit. And in terms of what I'm teaching my daughter, I don't want her to swallow her feelings to take care of other people the way that I was taught to. Some of that I think is great, but I'd rather her have a voice
Yeah.
more than I had a voice.
It's in context that
Mm-hmm.
that matters. And I'm so glad to hear you say that. I'm a huge Bell Hooks fan, and in her book Salvation, she talks about that, and specifically she talks about the two kind of tropes that Black women are forced to live under. And
Mm-hmm.
one is the mammy who sacrifices everything to take care of everybody else at,
Mm-hmm.
you know, being a
Yeah.
victim of it herself. Or the woman who doesn't want to be that and uses her power and her wiles to get what she wants. She's this temptress, this seductress, this
Mm-hmm.
scarlet letter wearing kind of whore almost,
Right.
and that those are the only two things that Black women are allowed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And no, you are a human being and you get to be
Right.
all the things that human beings can be, experience the full range of emotions and
Yes.
experiences. And so it's good to hear you saying that to your daughter. And the other thing too, I think, is that people forget about is like what your dad talked about, I think is wonderful, right? And I think it is important to take care of business first.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
all that means for me is make sure that taking care of you is part of your business,
Business. Yes.
and just include that, just
Exactly. Yes.
it is
Very
what
much
it
so.
is. And same thing, on the other part is, about Blackness. We celebrate Blackness in a way here in order to get away from, worrying about and railing against and calling out anti-Blackness. We all know
Mm-hmm.
it's there, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you move past that? I think it's in celebrating and embracing your Blackness. I think it's in showing the culture and the society that Blackness is such an intrinsic part of America. You can't separate being American from Blackness because we're,
Mm-hmm.
huge contributors to it. And I'm just curious, what's your relationship to your Blackness, and what's it been like for you as a Black woman building this kind of career you've been blessed to build
Mm.
on Broadway?
It's a very, very interesting question. I'm thinking about my Blackness all the time now
Hmm.
with my kids, um, because I've moved to the suburbs and I moved, you know, but I was always in the suburb. Like my parents, we lived in the suburbs, so there was always this. And I went to a school that was predominantly white
Hmm.
as a child in my community. There was a lot of intrinsic biases, racism stuff going on where I'm from in North Carolina.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm in a neighborhood now, or I'm not even necessarily in my neighborhood because my neighborhood is mixed, but my kids are in this private school, but they're in a private school with a bunch of black people that don't act like them. Nobody
Hmm.
acts like
Yeah.
them, according to them. And
Hmm.
so I, and then I'm just give this example. Like my daughter was on a cheering squad with, that was all white. She was the only black person on the squad. She's on a
Hmm.
soccer team, all white soccer team. And she comes to me one day and she says, I don't want to be the only one. I hope I'm not getting too far away from these questions. I
No,
don't
you're
want to be
good.
the only one. I have a son too. I'm always seems like I'm always talking about my daughter, but I do have a son. They're twins. Anyway, um, so I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't want you to be, but this is what you've chosen. These are blah blah blah. So let's just do something else. Now this year she aged out of her um cheerleading team, so we went to another team which was predominantly black. Then she says to me one day, yeah, mom, I don't really have anything in common with these girls.
Yeah.
So then I'm panicked, like, what is wrong with me and what I'm giving you that you feel like you don't have anything in common with these girls. Now, some of them were younger, some of them were from a different socioeconomic group, but I was just trying to figure out what am I doing with my blackness in front of my black children that
Mhm.
makes them think they're different than these people or that. So that was like wide opening for me that I'm not either I'm not present enough or I'm not vocal enough. So when you ask me about my blackness, it's not something that I really even think about other than I'm a part of this group now, Black Theater United, that
Mhm.
is championing, I can't ever say that word, that is
You
standing
said it.
up for Black artists, Black bodies in my industry. And I do that daily. I show up, I'm a Black woman. The roles that I've gotten, they've all been basically Black women.
Mhm.
Sweet Sue didn't necessarily have to be Black when they were looking for her. She wasn't a Black woman. That wasn't the person who did it in the workshops before me was not a Black woman. So I get the opportunity to add that, infuse that now. So they've written it around. It's sort of shaped that way now because of the time period,
Yeah.
but it wasn't always that way. Um, but for the most part, my career had been Black women.
Mhm.
It's not something I think about because I'm Black. I show up and that's who I am, and I don't know. I don't have to talk about it or do anything other than to fight for how who's going to do my hair and who's going to is this shade right and what kinds of stockings are you buying? What color? This is not my color. You know, those kinds of things have
Yeah.
always been a part of the conversation in my career and standing up for Black people and those incidents or harms that come our way because people just are clueless half the time have been things. But there's not been I haven't really stood up until lately for Black people or Black or being a Black woman. I'm getting an award Monday from Black Women on Broadway, which is an extraordinary organization that I was so inspired and lifted by last year in their inaugural celebration.
That's
But this year,
beautiful.
I'm the recipient of the Audra McDonald Legacy Award. So here lately, I am thinking all the time about what legacy I'm leaving as a Black woman in this business. Um, as I told you, I've gotten a lot of love from people um, since my announcement. People that I don't even know that knew me
Mhm.
and are affected by my walk.
Yeah.
All I'm trying to do is be me, and I'm a Black woman. So that comes with I'm a country, I'm Southern, you know, so
Very much
everything
that.
that comes
Very
with
much.
me just comes, and that ideal that my father instilled and my mother instilled, just do the right thing, even when you're attacked for it or the wrong thing is happening to you, and God will take care of whatever it is that comes your way. So while I'm not necessarily, I am now doing more standing on the table. No, we need this, that, and the other. But I wasn't always that way. And I definitely wasn't that way before the pandemic because I was the person who went along. Even if there was harm happening to me,
Mhm.
I muscled it because I didn't want to appear like an angry Black woman. I didn't want to cause the next Black person not to get the job based on my behavior. Um, So a lot of times I wasn't standing up for myself and using my voice in the
Those are,
way that I am now.
and it's tough.
Um,
Those are tough burdens to
yeah,
bear that you
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
ask for. And on one hand, and this is why I asked the question, I want to have
Mm,
us, think about it, talk about it out loud, because it's really unfair that for us, we have to spend so much of our time on this earth, so much of our energy in a day contemplating how our perceived, because it's not, race is not even a real thing, but
mm-hmm,
how our perceived blackness puts us in harm's way potentially
mm-hmm.
or makes a way for us sometimes, but we
Yep.
have to be burdened with that. And for me, told a friend this once. I was talking about going into a store and worry about security following me, or wondering, am I getting paid the same amount for this job that my white counterpart is? Those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm,
I was like, bro, that's like an app burning in the background constantly, draining my battery. So you, my white brother, start the day at 100%. I start the day with my battery already at 65% from dealing with that crap.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we can't escape it. So it's like, how do you find a way to move through life being authentically who Natasha Yvette Williams is, by
Mm-hmm.
but also acknowledging and understanding that you are a Black woman, and whether you like it or not, whether you chose it or not, other people's hopes and dreams are on you on some level. And it sounds like you're doing what needs to be done. You're being present in the moment, and
Mm-hmm.
you're finding a way to be who you were called to be, but looking at how that affects other people, particularly those that you love and care for, your offspring, first and
Yeah.
foremost. And you got to be easy and give yourself grace, but just be mindful of the role you're in. And listen, when you win this Tony Award, and I'm speaking it, I'm speaking it. I
Yes.
don't believe in
Okay.
superstition.
Mm-hmm.
There's that. So that's the next step for you. So
Mm-hmm.
just carry on, sister. But I was
Yeah.
just curious about your relationship to it.
Yeah.
Another thing I'm curious about your relationship though too is this character, Sweet Sue, that you play in Some Like It
Mm-hmm.
Hot. What's your relationship to and with the character? How much of Natasha Yvette Williams is in Sweet Sue, and how much has Sweet Sue taught you about being Natasha Yvette Williams?
Wow. I think Sweet Sue is a combination of all of my aunties and my mom. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she's fiery and she's bossy. She's the boss. She's smart. She's nurturing, and she's affected by everything around her. And she dresses like my aunt Christine, and she might cuss you out or drink like my aunt Bessie. Or she is smart like my aunt Lois, and she's loving like my mom. Um, so I'm thinking Sweet Sue thinks she's in control of all these women and moving all these chess pieces around because she's a leader of the band. But they're all feeding into everything that she needs. All of the women give her something um,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of makes her allowed to fly and makes her fight harder for their safety, for our movement through this time in 1933. So it's a total exchange with her, and it is also with Natasha. Natasha is involved in developing Sweet Stew, but in the easiest of ways because she's so uh, vivid in my mind who she is. And she's definitely just all of my aunties, a slice of all of them just rolled into this one woman. And I asked what they would do during this time period and in this situation. And we just go from there.
Natasha, first of all, brilliant answer and obviously the
Yeah,
truth. Secondly, I want to come to the cookout because your family sounds interesting
they
as
are.
yeah.
They are.
And third, it brings to mind another question. I'm always curious about this with actors. I have several friends who are actors, but how much of Sweet Sue do you bring home with you, or any character? When you're in a character this often, how much of it, if any, do you bring home? I know some people are method actors, and
No, no, no.
that's a whole thing. But what happens for you?
I don't bring her home. I don't bring her home. I'm good to let her stay here. Um,
Mhm.
in these walls in this room. I because part of it is me. We obviously go,
Mhm.
but I've been taught. I think my teaching at A&T was that can turn into a little bit of madness trying to take that stuff with you. So you leave it there, and I've been very fortunate to be able to do that. And my characters, especially like Sophia and all those people. Now, my husband will tell you today that I'm Sophia. I'm
Mhm.
a little bit bossy or whatever. He says that about me. But I try and I think I do. I'm very successful at leaving my characters where they are because I'm excited about playing all different kinds of characters. So I want to get into the practice of knowing how to turn that off and to do my job, which is, not living as my character outside of
Yeah.
the stage. So yeah.
That's good to hear. I know I heard Will Smith telling a story about how he kind of separates it, his real life from the characters, but
Mhm,
your memories, particularly like on a cellular level, can't
mhm,
necessarily discern between acting and playing and what's
mhm.
real. And so when you play a traumatic role like the one he
Yeah.
just played, that
Mhm.
whether you like it or not, you carry some of that with you.
Sure.
And I think he was starting
Sure.
to go towards that being kind of why he reacted the way he
Yeah.
reacted during the famous
And that's
slap.
where the madness comes in. You have to be able to figure out how to detach yourself, call on it when you need it, because that's what makes, you so brilliant on stage or so brilliant on film is
Mhm.
that personalized connection to whatever it is you're dealing with. But for the sanity of yourself, you have to be able to know that there's a technique involved to use to turn on and turn off those things because you are exposed and so vulnerable when you're in playing, a difficult roles like that. But yeah, you can lose your mind. So
Yeah.
so let's protect it and
And it's got to be tough because as a
figure it
performer, you're
out.
giving so much of yourself to the role, but
Mm,
then as a celebrity or as a star, you're giving so much of yourself away to the world. And to that end,
mm.
I'm curious, do you read like reviews? Do you listen to the chatter from the pundits? In particular, things like your chances of winning the Tony. Have you been listening to the
I
chatter,
have
like the
not,
pundit?
for the nominations, I was like tuning into different people's podcasts and different things on YouTube
Hmm.
and seeing what the numbers were like. But I haven't listened since being nominated because I don't want to hear it. Because I heard a couple times when I um was listening prior to, right after it, I did listen to somebody who, no, it wasn't after. I haven't listened to anything after. It was before they were projecting who they thought was going to be nominated or whatever.
Hmm.
And I wasn't on this particular list. And I've read something afterwards. They said, I don't know why Natasha didn't have enough to be not. I don't understand why her nomination came, because she didn't have enough to be nominated for. And I thought that person has obviously not seen our show because I am exhausted. But then I was like, I'm not listening to this stuff no more. This boy didn't even watch them. He ain't even seen our show. Um, if he thinks I didn't have it, he watched the movie because Sweet Sue doesn't do anything in the movie. So maybe he saw that and thought, that my character didn't have enough to do. But I did watch prior to. So the answer to that is prior to the nominations coming out, I was listening and trying to see, oh, okay, well, this one. And I looked at something that had odds and I was like, oh my gosh, odds. Oh, okay. So if I'm high, I was trying to figure out for a minute, I forgot what odds meant. And I was like, "Oh, this person thinks I'm a long shot. This person think, you know what I mean." So that, but
Hmm.
I tried, like I gave myself a limited time to check those things out, and I did that. I think maybe 2 weeks prior to the nominations coming out. I did it for one. I did it checked a couple times in the 2 week range to see what was happening and what people thought, and and then I stopped. Then I let it go. So
Yeah,
now
I
I'm
think you
good.
got to stop. You talk about losing yourself in the character and that leading to madness. I think
Oh
reading those
yes,
reviews and listening to pundits can lead you to madness quickly. The other thing too is, you guys love what you do. You love the work. We all do the things we do. At least those of us who are blessed, we do the things we do because we love it, right? But
hmm
it's also nice to be awarded.
yes,
How do you manage those expectations? How do you well, Auntie Angela has that moment now where she had that moment, that brief moment of disappointment, or at least alleged
right.
disappointment at the Oscars. How do you prepare yourself to receive the blessing, but stay detached enough that you can keep it together in that moment if it doesn't go the way you'd like it to go? Like, how does one navigate that? Is it something you even think about?
No, I think you have to think about it, or I've had to think about it because I've had to think about it all my career in terms
Hmm.
of not just awards, but each job or each audition. There's so many no's that we get weekly, depending
Yeah.
on how many times you audition before you get the yes. So what I've developed that has been helpful is the goal for me is to win the room that I'm in, meaning the casting director, those directors, those creatives that are in there, even if they can't use me for this project. The
Hmm.
goal is to leave such an impression that the next time or the appropriate time that comes up, they'll call me.
Yeah.
So I think for this Tony season and for this award, even I have developed that same type of thing. I've been telling myself I've won already, whether they call my name on June 11th to say that
Hmm.
is not that it doesn't matter, but I've already won. So getting here to this spot, mm, recognizing how faithful God has been to me, recognizing all of the pieces that have led up to this, all of the steps, all of the paths, the process for me is what is most important. My process and how I've progressed, how I've gotten myself into a position to be nominated is the cake. The award, if it comes, is the cherry. It's the topping. So I've already gotten the cake. And that's the process, and that's how I'm going through it. And that's how I prepare myself for whatever happens. I'm going to grin and smile regardless, because I've already got the cake. Already had the cake. So,
Absolutely. That's absolutely
mm,
true. And clearly, you mentioned it multiple times, and I know because we've had this conversation. We're both believers, people of faith. I feel like people can and should believe what they believe based on culture, and they figure it out at the end. But I'm really curious about the role of your faith, your spirituality
mm-hmm,
to the work that you do and how you balance being self and doing the work and being among
mm-hmm.
that. The role of your faith and your spirituality in that, because I think that's overlooked for people so often. You know what I mean? Like people
Yeah,
talk about the differences between this religion and that religion, but everybody, I think, is well served by some kind of spiritual practice, whether it's meditation, whatever works for them. I don't want
right.
to get into denominations and faith systems. But
Uh-huh.
what's the role been for you in your life and your career that you built of your spirituality, of your faith?
I start every job opportunity, every moment with asking God to place me where I'm supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going into this audition. I want this. I think this is what I need. But you place me where I need to be. And then wherever he places me, then I know that I have some job to fulfill that isn't just my character. That is me being an example in the room for people
That's good.
of what it means to choose to do the right thing, choose to be positive, choose to be happy, choose to be the peacemaker, choose, my role, that's been my role in most of the companies that I've been in. Um, and I celebrate that and open, like I said, each audition with that, but each start of a new job, it is what am I supposed to be giving to this space, to the people in this space. I work with people that are agnostic, people that don't believe in God, don't believe religion, whatever. But if I can love on them enough for them to ask a question about my God, my daddy, then that's what I'm there to do. And do my job. My
Mm-hmm.
job is to be this performer. But outside of that stage time, my job is and during that stage time, I'm representing God. I'm representing Jesus. I'm representing what I those ideals that I believe in. And so I'm supposed to be fishing all the time for men, women, binary people. I'm a non-binary people. I'm supposed to be fishing for souls. Um, So I do that, and not by standing on the corner preaching
Mm-hmm.
and beating people over the head. I do that by my life and the decisions and choices I make. Do I mess up? Do I get it wrong sometimes? Obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
that too can be a lesson for somebody in how that mistake is dealt with and how that um indiscretion or whatever it is, this mistake, how I deal with that and how I move forward from that and how I recognize and show how he forgives me for whatever it is I did wrong and I extend that to somebody else. Um,
Yeah.
so that's my role in this business. I'm the salt and the light for him in my business. And sometimes that puts me in some positions that are not reflective of him. But I need to be reflective of him. I need to look like um, the one who called me to do this work and the one who blessed me to share this gift. So that's what I think my role is. And I do that every opportunity I can.
I'm grateful for that answer, and I'm
Mm,
grateful the spirit moved me to ask you that question because I think it's important for people to hear. And again, you look at the country, and there's all this talk about gay rights and trans rights and sexism and abortion and women's bodies and such. And it's like if particularly with Christians, if you're going to say you're a Christian, then
mm,
you're called to make disciples. And if you're going to make
mm-hmm,
disciples, you and the people you're turning into disciples is supposed to be following in Jesus's teachings, which chief
mm-hmm.
among them is to love one
Love.
another the way that
Yes.
he loved us, so that people will know by that act that we are his. And so we're
Yes.
doing all these unloving things in the name of Jesus. People do unloving things in the names of Allah. People do unloving things. It's like you're not living up to the ideals that you profess that you have. And it's just great to
Yeah.
see you be that kind of light in the world. And It doesn't have to always be preachy. It doesn't have to always
Mm-hmm.
be churchy. Sometimes it's just about you showing up and being the thing that you
Mm-hmm.
profess
Yeah.
to say that you believe in. I mean, the purpose of the podcast came out of my seminary studies. And most people don't
Mm-hmm.
do that because I'm not doing a faith-based religious podcast. I'm showing
Mm-hmm.
up as who I was created to be, and showing what love can look like in the world. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I'm still moving in my vocation, my calling,
Right.
being who I was created to be. We're all called to be something, or we wouldn't be here. So it's so good to see you be that. And, especially when you have those moments where you have to be peacemaker, which lately seems like more often than not on Broadway, from all this
Mm-hmm.
bad behavior I've been seeing. Patty
Yeah.
LuPone having to cuss people out, and Wendell Pierce having to talk to poor
Oh,
that unruly guest and death and sales.
right.
Have you ever had any of those crazy moments that happen in your life on stage?
I kind of, I not really. I mean, my stuff has been happening. I got crazy stuff backstage, with people and behavior, but
Mhm.
I haven't had any offset moments. But I think as the theater opens up and is more accessible to people that are not used to theater the way it's been done, we're
Yeah,
gonna have to we'll have that. Part of the work with BTU and the new deal for Broadway was audience development and learning how to deal with audiences that um, come in and want to make noise. Want to
yeah.
talk to the people on the stage. Want to well, you ain't supposed to be eating your chicken now. You ain't need to be bringing
You
fried
see,
chicken and stuff into the theater to eat. But part of what we do as we grow to expand and invite other people in
hmm
is learning how to make people feel welcome without discarding who they are. So that
exactly,
we have to
exactly.
teach people, okay, yes, we want you to clap and laugh and enjoy this expression, but you don't have any lines. So let's not talk. Let's not try to have a
I
conversation with people on stage.
I have an idea, and I don't need to do it myself because I don't have. It's not my calling, but I have an
Mm,
idea.
mm,
I think Broadway should create a program. It can be virtual as well as in person,
mm-hmm.
and it's however many hours you have to pass this program that teaches you how to perform. I mean, how not to perform, but how to be an audience member
I'll
in an
be an
audience
audience
in a
member.
Broadway show. And if you
Listen.
complete it and you got the certificate, you get 10% off your first show or whatever.
Oh,
And you're building audience, but you're building an audience that knows how to act in the theater.
right,
Because I
right.
ain't gonna lie, there's something to be said, because I've seen some of our shows. It's something to
Uh-huh.
be said for the audience participating and being part of it. It's a cultural thing for
Oh, I
us.
love it.
And by the
Color
way, I'm
Purple
not
was
saying this was
glorious. Chicken and Biscuits was glorious, to have that
exactly.
feedback, but it can get tricky. It can get
Yeah.
tricky as
And
well.
be clear. I want to be clear because people take stuff and run with it. I'm not saying this only us and just us,
Right.
or even primarily us causing the unruly stuff on Broadway, because it's actually not that at all.
No, no.
But I'm
Mm-mm.
just using that as a particular example. Sometimes I've seen Tyler Perry shows and the audience is involved as the
Yes.
actors, and so there's something joyous and culturally relevant about that. But Broadway's a little bit different place. I think Broadway can bend, but I think people also have to have some common decency. I mean, come on, man,
Yes.
phones going off during the middle of the shows and stuff. Come on,
Exactly.
dog. You're not the president. You can go without that phone for 90
Yes,
minutes.
you can.
You can do it. Just try hard. You can do it. You What is next for you? And by the
Mm,
way, before we go into what's next,
mm-hmm.
I want to remind you. I want to remind our listeners. Last year, this time of year, we had
Mm-hmm.
Michael R. Jackson on the show. He was nominated. We did the show. And a couple of days later, well, the rest is history. So we are
Mm-hmm.
praying that that happens again. Congratulations to all the other nominees, but we pulling for Natasha. And if
Yes.
that happens,
Yes.
that's going to be the new stamp. We're going to put that stamp on this every year. All the nominees, come on down, cause we got track
Right.
record here. But what's next for you? What are you excited about? What's coming
Well,
next?
when you give me that lead in, what is next for me is winning this Tony Award for Best Featured Actress in a Musical on Broadway. Because as I've said, I've already won.
hmm
Whether they call my name or not, I've already won. But that is next for me. Right after that, immediately following that, I have written a movie that I want to shop and get that out there. It is about inspired by Mamie Peanut Johnson, who was a woman who played baseball in the Negro Leagues with the men. It is about her rise into the Negro League and the simultaneous demise of Black businesses during that time. Uh, when you talk about the synergy of theater, um,
hmm
the Negro League was that too for the Black community in terms of everybody coming to these games and all of those businesses that Black people were allowed to patronize our businesses,
Yeah.
they excelled and soared. And the moment that we were integration happened and we were allowed to go across the river to such and such store, we did that somehow thinking that the water was colder or the ice was colder over there because we had been denied it so long. But what that did was allow the disparity in our businesses and in our those hat shops and those ice cream parlors and those hotels and those restaurants that supported us and that we were able and open to us the whole time. We
Hmm.
somehow forgot how to create that community, a sense of community. So that's also happening. It also happens today and now. But that is what I'd like to work on, getting that story out and told.
That
Um,
sounds like a fascinating story. I'm a huge baseball fan, Dodgers for life.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm a huge baseball fan, and I know
Uh-huh.
the Negro League as well. So that sounds like
Yeah,
a great
yeah.
story and an
Well, I
important
knew,
one.
and while I knew the Negro League, I didn't know women played with the men, and
Hmm.
that was toward the end of the league. There was three women that ended up in the league, but they were trying to get their audience back. They started losing players, started losing audience to
Right.
the majors, and so they said, well, what can we do to get the audience back? So that's what they added women. So yeah, so that's next. I'd like to do some TV and film, and do more Broadway. I want to do everything that God gives me strength to do. Um, and I think that is a part of just being a well-rounded artist in all mediums. Um, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he lays out for me to do.
And spend lots of time with those 12-year-olds because they're going to
Oh
be
yes,
18
honey, they're
before
gonna
you
be
know it.
there.
Soon they
I
won't
know.
have time to talk to you
They don't
if that
have it
hasn't
now,
already started.
actually. They don't
Okay.
have it
Yeah.
now. They just call me when they want something. You know what? Somebody asked me, "What did your kids say when you were nominated?" I was like, "My kid said, where's my soccer uniform? Where did you put my soccer?" That was it. So that reality, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. The best to you. Good luck and
Thank
blessings
you.
and prayers for the awards. And why don't you drop your social or your website or whatever you want people to have, and we'll put it in the
Okay,
show notes as well.
I promise I'm going to do better at keeping these things up. My Instagram is my entire name, uh, NaTasha Yvette Williams. Because you do at, I think at first, at
Hmm.
NaTasha Yvette Williams. I am Natasha Williams on Facebook. I am Tata Star 411, I think, on Twitter. Although I don't do that. I don't do
That's
that much. But
hilarious.
maybe
Yeah,
you should leave that one
Twitter's
alone.
a little bit of
It
a
only
cesspool now.
okay, yeah, leave that one alone because I don't even know what
Hmm.
that is. And that's basically it. So Insta and my website, I think is up. I'm not sure. It's NatashaYvetteWilliams.com or .net, one of those. But I need to
And
update it.
and what about the show? What
The show is called Some Like It Hot. We are at the Schubert Theater here in New York City on 44th Street. We're here eight shows a week. You can come on in and see us, and you can watch the Tonys. I don't know when this is airing, but if you can watch the Tonys, June 11th on CBS. And
this is airing on
oh, I'm on
Tuesday,
Run
right,
the
people?
World, the new season of Run the World. I'm in that too. I'm playing Brisha Webb's auntie. So
Ah,
watch
she's
that.
around the world. So she
Yeah,
does do television, y'all.
yeah,
So
yeah. I
there's
want to do
TV right
more
there.
television. I do television. I want to do more of it.
Let's make it happen. Well, once again, thanks so much, Natasha Yvette Williams. It's been a
Thank
pleasure
you.
and best to you.
Thank you so much.